In this episode, we're going to explore how the power of showing up authentically during the holidays is really going to be the thing that lets you let go of the masks that you might be wearing, especially in family environments that might be triggered this holiday season, and embracing your full self, which also includes the shadow self, and really understand how showing up in this authentic way is going to allow you to experience deeper connections and less stress this holiday season. So let's dive in. Welcome to Essence, the podcast that helps you liberate yourself by understanding the heart of your relationship patterns. For the empathetic woman ready to transform that relationship overwhelm into liberation, I'm Olivia Heine, your host and coach in NLP, cycle syncing, and relationship dynamics. I'm here to guide you through emotional regulation, shadow work, and self-discovery that leads to true healing. If you're someone who feels deeply, who often puts your needs last, or is navigating challenging times in your relationship, you are in the right place. Together, we'll explore what it means to show up authentically, articulate your needs, and embrace the kind of conflict that can actually cultivate deeper connection, so that you can create more fulfilling relationships by being fully seen. This is all about uncovering the essence of who you are and how and why you show up in your relationships the way that you do. So let's dive in. Welcome to Essence and to the final fourth episode of this 4-part holiday trigger series that we've been doing the last couple weeks to really support you in supporting yourself as you move through navigating family and relationship dynamics this holiday season. My name is Olivia Heine, and I'm here to support you in going from overwhelmed to liberated in your relationships. Navigating your one-on-one relationships is truly a lifelong journey. There's constantly something else to learn as you move to new heights and new levels in your relationships. New things are going to arise, and knowing how to truly navigate every one-on-one relationship that you move through in your long and beautiful life is the greatest gift that you can give yourself. Everything that you create ultimately comes through relationships, right? Every opportunity, everything that you birth metaphorically or truly into this world, every season of growth or every next level that you get to, it all comes through interactions, whether that's clients in your business, colleagues that you are connecting with, bosses or mentors, your intimate partners and romantic relationship, and of course, also friends and family. And most of the time, what we're focusing on here are your personal relationships, specifically your intimate relationships, because that is where the greatest mirrors exist. This is the one person, technically, or generally, who you are so intimately intertwined with that it's going to trigger some of the deepest parts of yourself. Some of your deepest shadow fears are going to come up, some of those deepest and most raw and vulnerable insecurities. But it very naturally reflects back to other relationships that you have. The patterns that are playing out in your intimate relationships tend to play out with friends or with family. And again, coming back to that root core of where those patterns originated from in the first place was from your upbringing. And that could be generational patterns, things that have been passed down. Those can be conditionings, societal conditionings that you learned in the world around you as you were growing up in your environment, but also growing up in your family environment. So what those things teach us then is to wear particular masks, to show up in a certain way that is going to give us acceptance that we crave. Acceptance, validation, belonging. And ultimately, these are core things that we seek and crave on a survival-based level. When you are a child, a sweet little innocent child, you cannot fend for yourself. So you need to ensure the love and, at the very core, acceptance of the people in your environment growing up who were able to protect you, who are there to care for you and fend for you and ensure that you survive another day. On a primal level, that's what we're doing. And so we learn what we need to do to fit in. We learn what we need to do to be accepted. We learn what we need to do to receive what it is that we need to receive to survive. And that feels maybe like it sounds a little bit intense, but on a psychological level, that's what our brain is doing. And our fear-based brain, the part of our brain that is constantly on guard for ensuring our survival, is looking for these threats all the time. So when we come back to the place where we learned these conditionings in the first place, meaning when you go back home this holiday season, or when you go back into family environments or family dynamics this holiday season, or maybe you're not in a family environment, maybe you're not spending the holidays with immediate family, but it still brings up triggers from that time based on whatever the relationship dynamic is like for you right now. All of these things can trigger old ways of being to play out that your child version of yourself learned that they needed to do in order to fit in, survive, and gain acceptance. So ultimately, over time, what this means is you end up pushing away this authentic part of yourself. So anything that didn't fit into what you needed to do to gain acceptance, recognition, validation, love, belonging, any of those core needs for survival needed to be eliminated essentially. And nothing that is true to who you are can be eliminated. So it's being pushed into the shadows. And over the years of growing up and being in these environments and having this reaffirmed to you over and over and over again meant that you pushed it into the shadows more and more and more and more. So there's parts of yourself that are authentic to who you are, but that you are keeping in the shadows, that you are hiding. And these can be very clear insecurities, like I'm not good enough, I'm too much, I'm too loud, like no one will understand me, I'm going to be misunderstood if I share this desire, or like my spiritual side, for example, or this belief or these opinions. It can be fears around being accepted, being judged if you don't fit into the mold, what people will say about you. It can be unpleasant emotions. So, really sharing emotionally how you feel. Like maybe you weren't allowed to express anger as a child, or if you cried, you were told to stop crying. And so, when those things come up, you try to adjust yourself or you try to push it away, not fully letting yourself experience what you are needing to experience. And of course, I can always add a little caveat here. We want to do that in a healthy way, right? We don't want to freak out at someone. We don't want our triggers to be projected onto the people around us. That's why we do the inner healing work, so that we process those things and release those things so we can show up in a really emotionally balanced way. But being authentically and fully yourself means allowing every single part of who you are to have a seat at the table, metaphorically speaking, right? Where every single part of you is accepted, not because it's necessarily accepted by the people sitting around the table from you, but because you are showing yourself acceptance. You have your own back in that situation. And because you have your own back, you allow yourself to be fully seen by yourself. And therefore, you're allowing yourself to be fully seen by others. So, in short, this very like deep psychological way of saying this is just to say, when you go home for the holiday season, when you're in that environment again, when you're with family, when triggers arise, you are not adjusting yourself at the family dinner to keep the peace. You are not overextending yourself to please. You are not overgiving to be the perfect host. You are allowing yourself to show up exactly as you are. And of course, that also means knowing who you are. That's the work that we do here. That's the work that we do inside my course, Liberation. That's the work I do with one-on-one clients. Because, of course, how do you know how to show up if you've always been adjusting yourself? You've always been wearing a mask. You might not even know who that full, true, authentic version of yourself is anymore. No one can blame you for that. But you want to reconnect with her. You want to reactivate or reignite that version of yourself, letting that version of you know you get to come back out. It's safe for you to come out now. You don't need to adjust yourself anymore. And again, super, super important to say, and I say this in almost every episode, but this is not a blame game. This is not to say someone forced you into the corner or someone forced you to put yourself into the shadow. No, this is a very natural survival method. Your brain is trying to protect you. You are taking in the world around you as pieces of information of what you need to do to survive. And fitting in is just a really big part of that. So this is not about pointing fingers at anyone, but it is about recognizing, what did I have to do to receive what I needed to receive? And in what way is that maybe not serving me anymore? In what way is that maybe not really true and authentic to me anymore? And now, with that knowledge and that awareness, being able to shift that, being able to recreate how you want to be showing up and come back to that true authenticity. aside from that, the holidays are often a time of immense stress and pressure, right? And in my first episode in this 4-part series on holiday triggers, I actually talk about, most of holiday stress is truly not about the holiday, but about these underlying triggers and relationship dynamics that are coming up that are actually stressing us out. So you can go and watch that or listen to that in the show notes. I'll leave the link. But this pressure around the holiday often makes us feel like we need to show up as a perfect version of ourselves, or that we need to show up in a way that meets certain family expectations, whether that's our own family or our partner's family, for example, which can lead us to feeling really unseen and disconnected. And honestly, by the end of the holiday season, being super drained and exhausted because all we've been doing this whole time is adjusting ourselves or navigating or trying to manage ourselves in order to fit into what we think the expectation is, to put on a particular mask or persona. And 99.99999% of the time, we don't even know that we're doing it. You're not aware that that's even going on because it is such a natural default mode that you are in. It is such a habitual thing that you have learned to do. And all of us are doing it because our default mode is always going to be the one that we turn to. We don't want to be exerting more energy than that. That's another way that the brain tries to maintain our survival, conserving energy. But with that, it also means it's always going to move and reach for the default. So one way to really reflect on how the shadows and triggers that are coming up this holiday season are interconnected with this authenticity piece, and how you can really kind of pull this authentic side of yourself back out of the shadows, out of wherever you have kind of shunned that version of you to, which again, such a natural reaction and response, is to really notice where you are seeking approval or validation, or how you're trying to avoid conflict. Because those are two main ways in which we adjust ourselves. So again, where am I trying to seek approval or validation? So gain some kind of recognition or attention, or I'm proud of you, or you're doing a good job based on how you are presenting yourself or what you're doing. Or where are you avoiding conflict? Are you agreeing with something that you don't actually agree with? Are you allowing something to slide even though it wasn't actually okay? Are you adjusting a boundary? And again, I encourage you to listen to my previous episode on navigating family dynamics during the holiday season, because there's a time and place for conflict, right? There's a time and place to have a conversation. And I think it's also fair to say if you are seeking out conflict, that is equally something to look at here. So not just avoiding it, but seeking it out. Because if you're triggered and you're responding to a trigger and you're allowing that emotional response to be the immediate guide to this is how I'm handling this situation and I'm going to freak out or get angry or whatever it is, that's also something to recognize and look at. That's more of a different path that we're going down then, about how we're showing up, and that has to do with the triggers being more at the forefront. What I'm talking about here is more avoiding that part, like keeping the peace, making things nice, making things pleasurable and harmonious, even if it means sacrificing your peace too much. And again, there's a balance, there's a delicate balance at play there. And it's also about knowing, when do I say something and when is it maybe, in my best interest in keeping my own peace to just not right now, but what do I need to do then to maintain my peace? And maybe that means I need to leave the room for a minute, or I need to get outside for a walk, right? So noticing where you feel you maybe need to play a role and where you're doing so unconsciously. And this can be a really tender reflection practice, because it can be a little bit shaky or ungrounding to recognize, wow, I've actually been adjusting myself here, or I've been putting on this role and I wasn't even really aware of it. And that can sometimes trigger things for us as well, because we've been playing this role for however many years it's been. And that can be a hard thing to admit to sometimes, right? However, more often than not, it leaves you feeling, again, exhausted and often more reactive, because you're constantly looking outside of yourself to gauge a situation, to see how you need to respond, to get information on what you need to do, as opposed to looking within yourself around what's coming up for me here. What do I need? What is this trigger communicating with me? What are the boundaries that I need to set here in order to maintain my peace? That's a huge energetic shift where you're feeding the energy back into yourself as opposed to giving it away outside of yourself in order to fix things externally. And often when we are people pleasers or empathetic humans, it's so easy to look at the external situation and say, if that's good, I can be good. So I need the external situation around me to be good so that internally I can feel grounded and at peace. When in fact, the reality and the truth is, the more at peace you are within yourself, the more the external situation just isn't going to bother you all that much, right? And that's a practice that's by no means like an immediate shift, but you are feeding back into yourself then. You are standing in your own corner. You have your own back. And that, when you do that, allows you to show up authentically and allows you to bring the parts of yourselves that have been shunned into the shadows that can actually be really powerful and beautiful parts of yourself, the parts of yourself that are loud and open and communicative and storytelling and opinionated even, and like that bring a flair and a flavor to things, but you're like, I need to be in this box and like this is what is expected of me. Allowing that part of yourself to come back out, that is really liberating. And that can only happen when you, again, have your own back, when you are standing in your own corner here, not looking to feed the external, giving your energy away, but feeding yourself internally, giving energy towards yourself so that you can remain grounded as you show up fully as yourself. Because ultimately, showing up authentically is most likely going to trigger some people around you as well. So being in that family environment where people have come to know you as playing a particular role or wearing a particular mask, when you start to change that, some people might get mad because that's not how they know you. That's not how they have come to expect you to show up. And they sometimes don't understand what that actually means, right? So, in a way, as beautiful and as empowering as this is, at the same time, you need to be able to then hold yourself through potentially getting some pushback, getting some criticism, having people around you be triggered, where you, again, need to be so strong in knowing this isn't about me. And I can play the villain for them if they need me to, because that's clearly what they're playing out. That's what they're projecting. But this is me showing up authentically as me. And that is way more important to me than adjusting in order to please the external. Does that difference make sense? And if that feels scary right now, that's okay. And I see you and I hear you and I hold space for you in that. That is where this work comes into play. That's why we do the work that we do inside Liberation, which is my signature course, or in one-on-one coaching, because it's one thing to be like, this is who I authentically am. And like, now I'm going to show up as her. And then you're in it and you're like, wow, I'm really fucking anxious right now. Or I'm getting a lot of pushback. Like maybe I'm doing something wrong. That's where we're shifting that work. This is where we're making the subconscious inner changes, reprogramming that so that you no longer feel the need to people please. You no longer need to be perfect. You're no longer feeling stressed by someone else feeling hurt by something. So it's shifting that so that these situations can happen with more ease. And ultimately, when you allow yourself to show up authentically, it's going to change the energy that you bring into the room with you. It's going to allow for deeper connection for yourself, within yourself, obviously, but also with others. And it's going to allow you to attract more meaningful interactions and connections into your life. So whether you're looking to attract a partner right now or attract connections in relationships, whether that's professionally or personally, that's going to shift when you allow yourself to show up authentically, fully for yourself. But also, there might be some rockiness around the family dynamic piece of this, but this is a really great time to practice this. And it doesn't mean you need to go full force and like, completely flip the room on its head when you are in a holiday family dynamic, but just practice it in small ways. Practice it in small conversations. Practice instead of, holding back on a certain topic, just sharing your 2 cents or sharing what you're doing in your work that you usually don't share, or sharing something about your relationship that you don't usually share, or about yourself, or whatever it is that is authentic to who you are. Does that make sense? And ultimately, again, Being able to show up authentically means feeling safe enough to show up authentically. And that doesn't always mean within the dynamic or within the relationship, because, the other person sitting across from you, that family member or parent or whoever it is, might never understand where you're coming from. They might never have the awareness to respect this part or understand why you've quote unquote changed. But you can make it safe enough for yourself by showing up for yourself and having your own back, knowing how to set the boundaries for yourself in a way that feels safe. And that would be the one small piece and little tool, because I've been giving little tools for each of these episodes that I would give you here, which is, if you can't be authentic externally, be authentic internally. So when someone says something, if you're like, oh, everyone's agreeing on this, and I know that if I disagree with this thing, it's going to become a whole thing, say it in your mind, right? Everyone's agreeing how terrible X is. In my mind, I'm going to say, that's just a belief, and that's not my belief. My belief is Y, right? And you can do this in every small conversation that you have. So you don't actually need to address something with someone. And again, I encourage you to play with this if you can, if it feels safe. But at the same time, it's going to create massive shifts just for you to bring awareness to this on an internal level in terms of the thoughts that you're having. Ultimately, authenticity is a beautiful, beautiful gift. And it's a gift because it's something that deepens connection and intimacy. Because the more authentic you show up for yourself, the more you're able to connect authentically with the person sitting across from you, the more real you get to be. And authenticity isn't just about being this loud, beautiful, weird, unique version of yourself. Absolutely, that's part of it. But it's also being the shadow part of yourself, the insecurities, the fears, the real, raw, vulnerable parts of yourself as well, and allowing those parts to be seen in a way that feels safe for you as well, at least within your intimate relationships. And the only way we can start to cultivate that is if you start showing up authentically with yourself first. So again, we're talking about the holidays here. We're talking about showing up authentically in these family situations, in these holiday dynamics, but it all begins within yourself. And that's what we're talking about here on the Essence podcast. It's about the essence of who you are, the essence of your authenticity, which is then going to allow you to show up authentically in your relationships and have that mirrored back to you as well. In this fourth and final episode, this is an invitation to invite more of yourself home or back home to yourself this holiday season. Whether that's with your family, with your partner, or just personally with yourself, allowing yourself to truly be fully, fully seen. I'm wishing you a beautiful holiday season. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a rating and review, follow along, pass this on to someone who you know would like it or appreciate or maybe even need it. It helps our podcast so much to grow and expand and reach all the beautiful, empathetic women and people and humans of the world. So thank you for being one of them, and I'll see you back here next time. Thank you for joining me on Essence. I hope today's episode gave you new insights and encouragement on your path to showing up authentically and embracing honest communication and connection. Remember, each step you take, whether it's setting a boundary, speaking up for your needs, or recognizing a pattern, brings you closer to a liberated, empowered self. If this episode resonated with you, please share it or leave a review to help us reach more listeners. Until next time, stay true to your essence, trust in your path, and keep showing up as the cycle breaker you are.